Hey, John.
Hey, Eric.
Oh, sorry. I couldn't help myself. I had to do that. So it's actually not John. We have a guest podcaster with us this week. Peter, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I am Peter Wooley. Let's see. So in the past, we used to work together, you and I. Currently, I am doing UX design for basically the EPO platform, kind of all the pieces, and then working with a bunch of other UX designers that work on all the other products. That's mostly my day-to-day.
You are probably the first person, as the last couple of days probably attest to, the first person I go to when I have CSS or JavaScript issues.
Yes.
I don't know this, but Peter will know.
It's so interesting. It's one of my favorite parts of being in this UX design role is that I actually consider myself a fair bit of a front-end developer. So I started on MFS. Working as a UI focused dev. But like I went to a design school, design is in my blood. So I like having this role. And then when I need a break, then either Travis Kincher will reach out or someone or you will reach out. And then I get to solve a fun CSS or JavaScript problem. And then once we solve it, I get to go back to design. and so I get a little bit of both, which is awfully fun.
Well, cool. You said you're a student, but you're also a teacher. Didn't you also teach a class?
I did. So I went to the Art Institute of Portland, specifically because I have a bit of an artist temperament. So disassociating myself from my work was a struggle. I'll be honest, is still a bit of a struggle. So I essentially went to a design school because I wanted people to yell at my work and for me to try to get over the fact that it's my work. It can be improved. I need to listen and figure out what can change. I will say that that worked pretty well. Not perfectly, but I think I can manage that pretty well myself. The nice thing, though, is that it was a web program that I went in that I actually got the Bachelor's of Science in. And then I was able to turn around and just a little while later actually be a faculty there. So I taught JavaScript classes there for a number of years. And that was super helpful because it solidified a lot of the front end knowledge that I needed in my day to day work, but being able to teach it kind of forced me to just pay a lot more attention to what I needed to know.
And for anybody out there listening, Peter is the easiest going guy, one of the easiest going guys I know. Easy to talk to. Always happy to help, even if I have dumb questions.
There are totally no dumb questions except for my questions.
Well, we can have a competition about whose questions are dumber. Anyways, so since we did have you on the podcast, and you are more UX, definitely UX and UI front end driven, I thought I'd mentioned there was a topic that I saw in the news this week on CSS Keyloggers and how you could completely write a keylogger in only CSS.
Yeah, I saw this news, and immediately, as soon as I saw it on Reddit, I think the post on Reddit that I first saw actually had a screenshot of the snippet of the code that was used. And as I saw it, it was so simple. Like, it was just obvious. I immediately saw what that keylogger could do, and then immediately freaked out, probably like everybody else did. I didn't follow up, but then just today I found someone wrote a post basically saying that indeed there is a CSS keylogger, but they're not too worried about it. And I'm sure we can put that in show notes. But the essential attack was that you were able to use pretty complex CSS selectors. These are selectors that were, I guess, introduced in CSS 3, where you could target input tags that had a password type, and then you could look at their value property and then basically see if they used any single character inside of that value property. And if so, you could load a background image. And by loading that background image, you could load it from anywhere on the internet. So it's any URL. So the idea is that when those keys were pressed or those values were entered, then it could load up some URL. And then wherever that URL is would know what key you pressed.
Yeah. So essentially you would, when you pressed a key, it would do a get to a specific URL, and the idea was you could even make those selectors trigger a get on a URL on a password input field. So
That's
that
correct.
you could type, start typing a password and it would make a get call to a URL. And you as the attacker would have to have the URL be some URL that represents the letter A, some URL that represents the letter B and the letter C, each a different URL and so on. At least that's how I understood it.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, the thing that freaked people out was, oh my goodness, just with simple CSS, you could create a keylogger. And since CSS and JavaScript and some of these kind of things are kind of easily injectable through ad networks or, plugins or what have you, there was that fear, at least initially, like you say, some fear about, is there going to be an outbreak of CSS keyloggers now?
I think in that Reddit thread that I was looking at, someone's like, hey, you can do custom CSS in your Reddit themes. Like, could we possibly do that? And I think now we understand that that is not the case. And the weird thing in this article the thing that struck me by surprise was that, and I didn't see it when I first looked at the CSS, probably because the required CSS was so simple that I just was like, oh, of course a CSS selector could do this. But what was actually happening was the selector required an attribute called the value attribute, which in my mind I was like, okay, so there's always, there's a value on most input fields. So that value is going to be filled in as the user types in a password. And then I realized that no, when I'm actually thinking about how this is implemented, when you're using an input field, a password or really anything else, you don't always set a value. And as the user fills it out, it doesn't modify that attribute in the DOM. It's visible to the user, and when they submit it, it gets submitted to the server. But CSS can't see that, or this CSS can't see it, because the value attribute isn't actually changing. So what you need is some sort of component wrapping your input fields. So something like React, where the user is entering in a key or entering multiple characters, and then there's some JavaScript that's actually modifying the value of that input field. At that point, once you're modifying the value attribute, then the CSS can go and kick off the GET request. So you need basically a bunch of extra stuff in order for this to work. So most of the time, this isn't going to cause problems. There are, as far as I understand, there are and can be mitigations for if you are using something like React. But the amount of worry that I think we all had that you can make a CSS keylogger, drop a CSS file onto any website, and then get pwned, that appears to not be the case.
Didn't I also see something somewhere? It was for the ad network thing. It was the other thing you can mitigate for was in your web server. You have the new content security policy header. I think that also is one of the big things to mitigate against that. I guess along those lines, have you seen the website securityheaders.io?
I have not seen securityheaders.io.
So securityheaders.io is actually kind of cool. You go to that website and you type in a domain and scan, and it will give that domain a grade based on what it believes are important security headers, strict transport security, X-frame options, cross-site scripting protection, content type options, refer policy, and a content security policy. And then kind of gives you instructions and kind of gives you some, hey, here's some ways to add those and why you want to add them and what they're used for, etc. I think it's kind of a fun little site. I don't know how important or
I can't imagine that it is completely, I think we're both failing to think of this one word. It's probably not thinking of all of the possible things that should be enabled, but it is at least showing you the ones that are well known where you're failing. I will leave this as an exercise to the reader, as I notice that this is sponsored by Sophos, but if you're a McAfee employee and you want to go type in McAfee.com, I will just let you go see what grade we get. But it is...
it's not a very good grade.
It's not great, but there is lots of information there, and I bet that we could take away some good insights from this.
I have my own personal website and ran it the first time. Did not do so hot. And so I went and made some modifications so that I would get a better grade.
That's very good. I remember the old days of using tools like Yslow, and they're so silly because a lot of the things that they would grade you down on, this was grading you on, a performance. I think security at some point became an aspect of what that tool would do. And I just remember like doing things going like, I know this isn't really helping, but I do want an A. I really like getting an A. So let's just go ahead and do this.
That's kind of what it felt like, because all of them were very simple. And so now my website has an A, but it's not, I don't think it does anything really interesting. Moving on. Well, I guess any last thoughts on CSS Keyloggers? Are we going to see an outbreak or a rash of CSS Keyloggers there, Peter?
I think at this point we're safe from CSS Keyloggers. It's probably just more of the crypto miners and other things that are being injected into all of our computers when we hit these web pages and get these ads pulled in. So I will endorse using an ad blocker. I don't know if I have to say that that's not McAfee saying that, but at this point, it's a dangerous world out there. Let's block some ads.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's see. Moving on. So that was fun. Appreciate that. The next one I want to talk about is Troy Hunt. He has the website. I think we've talked about it before. Have I been pwned? You can go see if your username has been involved in any breaches, data breaches, or anything like that. And it's kind of a cool site, and you can be notified. You can put in your email address and be notified if any new breach occurs where your email address is noticed. Well, following on from that, he's now taken all of the passwords of all these breaches. So now he has a 500 million, so 500 million
Yikes.
Passwords that have been discovered in breaches. And he's taken those and built an API, and it's really kind of a cool API. It's built on Azure Functions. So if John were here, John, thumbs up. There's your serverless plug. I know John's on vacation. He said he's going to listen to it. So shout out to John there.
And did I hear right? Is he in Disney World right now?
Yes. And I know you're a big Disney fan.
I am a huge fan. I mean, I was in Disneyland a month ago, and I'm already jealous of the fact that he's in Disneyland right now.
Well, he's in Disney World.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
You know what? I'll take any Disney park at this point. I'd actually appreciate going around the world and trying the other Disney parks. So, yeah.
Well,
good job getting out there.
Yeah, we'll have to make him actually tell us about the Avatar ride next week.
I got to go on it. I knew a cast member. I got to go down there oh man, this is going to be a Disney podcast now. I got to go down there, and I would say anyone that's interested in technology and rides and industrial design needs to get on this thing. So last November, I was able to go and try it. I knew a cast member there. We were able to go on it 2 times in a row, which if you can manage that, like the first time, just go experience it. And the second time, just look at everything you possibly can. It's a mix of all the best rides that Disney has done. It's so exciting. I will definitely listen next week to hear what John thinks about it. I think it's one of Disney Imagineering's crowning achievements at this point. It's very good. Anyway,
where were we?
We were talking about Have I Been Pwned and his new tool. Yes,
he now has a website. Well, it's his same Have I Been Pwned website, but it now has the ability to make an API call. And this is how we got sidetracked. It's on Azure Functions, so serverless stuff. John's excited. It's not rate limited, so you can go and just through his API, it's a get call, an HTTP get call, and you pass in a password, and it will return not only whether or not that password has been found in a breach somewhere in the past, it will also return the count or how many times that original password has been seen. If you have a password that is not very secure, like password with the @ sign, I think it exists 47,000 times.
Oof.
That password has been seen in 47,000 different times in various breaches. It's kind of a fun website. A lot of interesting information in how he set that up and how he was able to build it. And it is incredibly responsive with some of the caching stuff he did with it. It will return answers back. So it'll search the 500 million records in 20 milliseconds.
Whoa.
Just due to the caching he's been able to do. I mean, that's his average time, I guess. Cool. I think he talks about how he achieved that, and he worked with Cloudflare as well. Let's see, 18 milliseconds to 535 milliseconds have been some of the cached versus non-cached.
So I didn't read the article, but was one of his ideas that, like, as you're entering passwords, like, say, creating a password, you could potentially hit his service, and you as the website operator could say, hey, that password's terrible because it's been used constantly.
That is exactly what he's done. And there are several websites at the end. He has a little comments of, because he put this out initially a while ago, which only had 300 million passwords, I think it was, initially. And he's given the data out. You can download the data. They're all SHA-1 hashes. If you want to download the 8 gigabytes of SHA-1 hashes, you could compare those yourself. He also shows at the end that there are some websites that as you're trying to create a password for your account, it will say, the example he has in here is, you create an account there, and if it appears at all, it makes a call to his API. If it matches anything, it gives a message saying, this password has previously appeared in a data breach. Please use a more secure alternative, and then read more about how we can help protect your account, and password check by haveibeenpwned.com. So yeah, exactly. That's why he has this service here, is for that exactly, for people trying to create passwords, to have them say, hey, that password has been found in a breach before. Probably not yours, but your password you think is super uber secret? Probably not super uber secret.
Wow. The more we talk about this, the more I wonder. So I use 1Password as my password manager, and I wonder if, so I doubt that a 1Password password would be in this list, but I guess it could be, because they could be stored improperly or whatever, so there could be a randomly generated password that shows up in this. I wonder if these password manager tools could also integrate this to, when they generate a password, kick off that same GET request, just to make sure that they're not giving you what looks like a very secure password, but indeed has been included in a breach and could be sniffed or could be discovered.
I use 1Password as well. So, side question for you. Mm-hmm. Do you use the 1Password random characters, or do you use the passwords that are 4 or 5, whatever, random words?
So I use random characters as long as the field will allow me to do so, with as much complication as it will allow me to do.
Yeah. My biggest beef is the websites that don't tell you. And so you generate a password and you paste it in, and it's not obvious that the paste chopped off at 24 and I put in 36 or whatever it is. And then I go along and I'm fine for a while, and then all of a sudden I can't get a password.
This has happened. Yes, I curse every time this happens, and the first time I had no idea what to do. I think I just reset my password. But then what I've done, and this feels barbaric, if I forget to check the length, or I don't notice that there is a length set on the actual input field, what I will do is I will just go through and enter the password, delete 1 character, enter the password, delete 2 characters. And if I haven't locked up my account and have to reset it, then eventually I will delete enough characters where it's like, okay, this is what they let me put in. And it just feels terrible. It's almost as bad, but not as bad, as when you reach a site that doesn't allow you to copy paste into a field. It drives me bonkers. I think banks are the ones that think that they're making me safe by not allowing me to use a password manager, and it's just feels like 1999.
My thing I've now taken to doing when I have to generate a new password for a site is I go to the password input field and then I just start hitting the letter A and keep going until, all right, so I'm up to 30, I'm up to 40, until it gets to some point it'll say, maximum number of characters, 36 or whatever. I'm like, okay. Then I go into 1Password and I generate I use just random characters as well.
Yep. I will say the after having spent years of using browser dev tools, my go-to is right-click, inspect element, and then I look for the max, I think it's max length or max value on it. And if it's, the worst thing is when it's is when it's different. There's been times where I have seen in text it says, 6 to 20 characters, but the actual max length on the field is 16 or whatever. And I'm like, oh, you guys, you got so close to doing this right. It's like documentation. You can't trust that documentation. Turns out, yes. So it's almost become reflexive at this point when setting up new accounts.
Anyway, so this actually ties into something I thought would be fun, and then I have a bonus one for you later.
Great.
Is think of a password you may have used before you started using a password manager. I mean, I know I had a few. And if you feel so inclined, type it into the Pwned Passwords website and see if it has been found in a breach. So I'll do a couple, and you do a couple, and we'll see where we get here.
All right, and I'm going to preempt this with a little story. So this is the password that I'm going to use is I think it's the only password I've ever told anyone that I've used. I feel like there are so many clever passwords that so many people have used, and they just want to pat themselves on the back, but they can't because, security and all that. But this is a password that I used before I realized that you probably shouldn't use dictionary words. So I think we're talking, let's say mid-90s, if I'm being nice to myself.
Right.
So strangely enough, when I actually started at McAfee, so I work in the same office as you. I actually work from home most of the time, but come into Hillsborough every once in a while. When I was driving there every day, there was a particular vending service company, and there was a guy that lived apparently in Vancouver, or a person that lived in Vancouver, and then would drive into the office, which I believe was somewhere in Beaverton, and his truck had my password on the side of it. And every time I drove by, I was like, oh, what a terrible decision. So since I have divulged it in the past here, I will divulge it on here. I actually used the password Canteen, capital CANTEEN, Canteen, right there in the dictionary. I do not know what I was thinking. I can tell you that every open account I've ever used either doesn't exist anymore, or if you do happen to find an account, it's probably, I don't know, a video game from the early 90s. I don't know if Command and Conquer Red Alert had some sort of password, but that's probably still what the password is. But feel free to pwn me there. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that now.
I'm looking forward to that. So while you're loading that, I'm typing a password. So the password that I just entered, and actually I'm a little nervous because it was a password that included numbers. So it was a dictionary word, but included numbers, that I used on websites I really didn't care about. Like if I just had to sign up for something because I wanted to read an article or whatever, it was my default no-brainer password. That password has been seen 331 times before. So my thoughtful, clever, or at least I thought, it's a random number and a random dictionary word, which I would not have expected to have seen it that many times.
Yes. So I will tell you that the number of times that this particular password has been seen is not as high as I thought it might be, but that might be an indication that I was not quite as smart as everybody else around me at the time. So my password, Canteen with a capital C, has been seen 25 times before in the, how much did you say? 500 million? Was that
500 million, half a billion.
Half a billion. So, I mean, it's a low number, sure, but I do appreciate what his text says there, which is this password has previously appeared in a data breach and should never be used. I think that's just great. So yes, I will never again use that password. Obviously haven't been using it for a long time, but this is a fun exercise, and I do hope to see this in future both user creation and password reset UIs everywhere, including the ones we make. I think this is a great idea.
We'll put the website in the show notes. You can go and type it in yourself, or you can actually pass in a SHA-1 hash, or if you don't want to share your password at all out, you can download the 8 gigabytes and check yourself directly. All right. Well, Peter, have you before we started, I gave you a heads up. You had to pick something fun, and you were like, "Oh, I have too many fun things." Have you decided?
I do. I actually. So this is going to be maybe the geekiest thing I've ever done, and it might be. It might not be geeky enough for the audience. I'm not exactly sure.
The audience is 3 people so far, so you're fine.
All right. I will say, again, it's always a story with me. But a few years ago, I was approached by a guy that was building a Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition app for the iPhone. And he's like, hey, would you be interested in designing this thing? At the time, I had never played D&D. I ended up playing just enough to design what was, I think, a reasonable app. But then I kind of stopped playing. I just never really got into it. I feel like my geek credibility only went up a tiny bit, and then when I stopped it, it went back down. So my fun thing, and many people might know about it, is there is we're now on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. It's been out for quite some time, but there is a starter set. And I kid you not, I laughed at the idea of starter set. But I ended up getting it, and I've got a group of friends. We're all over 30. None of us had played. I had played just a tiny bit, but I'd never been the dungeon master for D&D. We ended up getting started, and we have been playing way more than I thought. It is, if you have never gotten into D&D or you've been curious about it at all, I would say I think it's like $19 on Amazon. The D&D 5th edition starter set is the super fun thing to do. I love cooperative games. I'm kind of terrible at competitive games. I get a little too competitive, and then I feel bad for winning and bad for losing. But the starter set has been nothing but fun. So that is my recommendation for the fun thing.
That's awesome. The bonus fun thing.
Okay.
Because John and I did this a while back. We looked up our very first thing we purchased on Amazon. You willing to share what your very first purchase is and what the date was?
I am willing to divulge. I feel a little bad because I think when you two did it, you had dates from like 2002 and 2000, which unfortunately I am unable to compete with that. So I was still using my parents' account at that time. I had my dad look up the orders, but we couldn't remember who bought what for when. So I ended up going back to when I opened my account, which was 2006. So quite a bit later than everybody else. But the first thing that I purchased, which I feel like everybody purchased a book first, my first book was something called Showstopper! The Breakneck Race to Create Windows NT and the Next Generation at Microsoft. This book has imprinted on my mind. The amount of stress that went into just dealing with NT, just getting Windows NT out there, and then obviously like effectively moving everything forwards, getting us out of the terrible Windows ME, getting us eventually to XP, and then allowing Windows to continue. I'm mostly a Mac user, but I'm very thankful that NT existed because I think that it moved the industry forward in a way that it absolutely needed to. That is, I would still recommend as a great book. Up until you guys did this on a previous episode, and I went ahead and just did it then. I hadn't looked, and I had thought that this book just stumbled into my lap. I actually thought that I had gotten it while I was working at McAfee. Someone was getting rid of books, but it turns out I actually purchased this. I paid my hard-earned dollars to get it, and I think it was worth it because I continue thinking about it.
Cool.
And did you want to know my first non-book purchase?
Yeah.
All right.
We're on a roll.
Yeah. So this one, actually, it was my next purchase. So it was placed early 2007, just following my birthday. So this is probably some birthday money. For $29.82, I purchased a Nintendo DS game called Hotel Dusk: Room 215. I purchased this actually thinking it was a different game. And ended up, I probably played it I was riding the Max at the time in Portland to get to school. I ended up playing it for, I want to say a good 40 hours. I hit a wall and never moved past it. And it has been stuck in the back of my mind. I use a site called Groovy to track my backlog of games, and it's still back there. I want to go back to it. I want to figure out what this game is. I have a Nintendo 3DS, and I think I can still play original games. I'm not exactly sure. Whatever. I feel like at some point in my life, I'm going to go back and finish this and solve this mystery.
Well, cool, Peter. This was fun.
Yeah, it was great.
I also enjoyed our little sidetrack over to Disneyland stuff. Disney stuff. We should probably do a whole side podcast just on Disney stuff sometime.
I could talk for hours on the new Disneyland Max Pass system and why it is way, way, way better than the Fast Pass system, either the paper one at Disneyland or the kind of cooler app-based one at Disney World. So yeah, I am full of vim and vigor when it comes to Disney parks, as well as UX design here at McAfee.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll call it a night.
Great.
Thanks a lot, Peter. Really appreciate you stepping in for John while he's out.
Thanks, Eric. It was lots of fun.
Talk to you later.
Farewell.
Bye.